Hello, fairy finders and fairy seekers. Welcome to FaerieQuest and another episode of Real Fairies in Real Photos. This time we are at the Mousehole Trail in Melbourne, Iowa, and we've gone back in time to August 27th, 2018. We've been here before on this channel, and you can check out that video by clicking on the link up in the right-hand corner there. As for why I am just getting to photos that I took back in 2018, well, it takes a while to go through photos, and sometimes the opportunity to get many photos in many places leaves a lot of them stacked up. So I'm going through them now, a little at a time. I took 104 photos on this date. I'm choosing the best of the best for you here, and yes, there will probably be a part 2. As always, before we get started, pull out your magic wand and zap that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and consider supporting this channel using the link in the description box below. Check out the new shop too while you're there. And don't forget the Fiverr link, as that's fun too. Okay, 2018 Mousehole Trail, here we come. We have a full body young lady fairy here. She has dark shoulder-length hair, and we see her face in a bit more than profile. The features are not real clear, but we can see she has 2 dark eyes. We see part of one small arm, too. She is wearing a skirt, which also allows us to see her legs. She is very intent on something in the grass in front of her. Perhaps she is busy gathering food. This is a really good picture. This is a prime example of a fairy using the leaves to form itself. We actually have 2 fairies here. The largest is elf-like, with a hat, large dark eyes, dark shirt, and a large foot. This one is looking at us. Then there is a small girl tucked in behind the larger one's foot. She has light hair that turns up on the ends, and we can see her face nearly straight on with dark eyes and a nose. She is wearing a darker shirt with a U-shaped neckline. We can see one arm and hand stretched out in front of her. These 2 are obviously friends, and the larger one seems to be protecting the girl. We have a fairy, F-A-I-R-Y, here, who has formed herself from leaves. We can see her wings clearly and the lower leaf of her body. She has her back to us and is looking over her shoulder. I might have dismissed this one, except we can see both of her eyes and an ear. They are white, but they are there. I believe she is wearing a hat also. This is obviously not her actual form, but if you saw possible danger, how would you choose to blend in? If you notice, she is not attached to the clump of leaves above her, but is suspended in midair. I believe we may have a fairy of the troll species in this photo. His face is very easy to see with both eyes squinted, his nose and his mouth in an O position. There is also an ear. He appears to be sitting cross-legged under a bit of a downed tree, as the top of his head is hidden. His body is harder to see, but there is an arm and a hand, and the shadows indicate the cross-legged position. His facial expression makes me think he may have bumped his head pretty hard, maybe while he was ducking for cover as I stepped up to take the photo. This female fairy has the flesh-colored face that made it difficult to miss her. We see only half of her face with one eye, nose, one cheek, and her mouth, but it is enough. The other half is hidden by the leaf. We can see part of her body, and it looks like she might be bending over or bending down, reaching for something. The arm and hand that we can see has a sleeve of black like her outfit, and this is the arm she is using to reach with. It's a pretty clear picture, especially her face. This fairy came out today in his camouflage hat. He was ready to hide in plain sight if necessary. We can, however, see his flesh-colored face with dark eyebrows, dark eyes, his nose, and one really thick beard. He has tipped his head down enough that his mouth is covered by his beard. We cannot see any other part of him, but his facial features are pretty good for as small as he is. Here we have a fairy who appears to be taking a snooze, or he is just faking it for my sake. What is so interesting about this fairy is his clothing. It reminds me of the camouflage clothing worn by soldiers and once worn by hunters. We can clearly see his hat and his face with eyes, nose, and his mouth in a shape as though he is letting out a snore. One arm and hand is visible and also part of his body. It is too hard to tell how tall he might be, so rather than assuming this is his upper torso, I'm just saying body. Part of him is hidden by the leaves. We have two fairy beings here, one older than the other, and they are hugging. The taller one has a fuzzy rounded black hat and blonde hair with ringlets. Her sleeve has a puffy upper portion and a white lower portion. We can see only her eyes and nose as her lower face is hidden by the top of the other girl's head. The smaller girl has dark hair. We can see her face next to the puffy green sleeve of the taller fairy. We see the smaller girl's eyes, nose, and mouth. Her upper torso, I believe, is covered by her dark hair. We caught a very touching moment. I feel as though this fairy is either emerging from the tree or she was walking along the top, spotted me, and fell, landing where we now see her. We can see her dark hair, dark eyebrow, her nose, and one quite defined eye. Her face is in profile. We can also see one leg bent at the knee and one foot. I believe she was wearing a green pointed hat, but it appears knocked askew. She is a tiny being. In this photo, I am not sure if this is a snake or a dragon, but I am thinking she's a dragon. We can see her neck with the scales on the front. I've labeled the base of her neck where she is just coming around to the front of the tree. We can see both eyes, but I may have the label for her mouth incorrect. This may be part of her nostril, but it is just very hard to tell for sure. She's beautiful though, and has blended with the tree so magically. This fairy is quite clear to see also, though enlarging made him almost like a plastic painting. We can see his hat, his ear, both eyes, his nose, and his mouth. He is within the leaves, so we are unable to see anything except his head. I get the impression that he is a wise man amongst his people. Maybe it's the hat, but he looks like he has been around the block a few times, and I feel that when he speaks, people listen. This is one of my favorite fairies. She appears to have really thick hair, which is parted above her right eye. We can see her eyes are closed and they are slanted. Her nose is also clear. The only other part of her that we can see is her arm and hand, very thin, but somehow it suits her. She appears to be wearing natural bangles on her arm. She is stunning. It looks like we spotted a fairy coming out of the ground, so I'm assuming he has his home down there. How exciting! He has a tall pointed hat with a brim. We can see his face in profile with one eye, the other is covered by a leaf, his nose, mouth, and whiskers or sideburn whiskers. We can also see one arm. I would think that the other arm would be in a similar position as he pushes himself up and out. How do I know he is coming out? I don't think the leaf would be above his eyes if he was going down in. I think he picked it up as he pushed his way up. I'm not sure why, but I feel like this fairy is a scientist of some sort. He has a no-nonsense look about him as he looks at me taking his photo. We can see the top of his head with no hair, his ear, hollowed out eyes, his nose, and what looks like a very full mustache. He is a bit skeletal in appearance. We can also see one arm and hand as he is reaching out in front of him, or he might be pointing at something to show me. Yep, that was wishful thinking. This fairy is one of my favorites too. I am sorry that this fairy, F-A-I-R-Y, is so blurred in the photo above, but if you look at the photo to the left, you will see how small she is within the leaves. We can see that her black hair is up in a lovely bun and even appears to have a flower in it too. We also see her face in profile, but only see two eyes and her nose as the leaves are covering up the lower part of her face. There is also one wing that we can see that may, in fact, have been fluttering. The wing is not a leaf, as the wing is rounded on the end and the leaves are not. I am not going to claim to know what this is, but I know what it looks like to me. If it is a rock amongst rocks, it stands out quite clearly, and there is no mistaking the closed eyes, nose, and mouth. It may be such a thing as a fairy who came through to our dimension to see if this was a place they would like to visit. Of course, at the time of the photo, their head was the only thing showing, and they maybe hadn't made a decision yet as to whether they wished to bring the rest of themselves. But that's just speculation. Whatever it is, it stands out clear as clear can be.